Welcome everyone to livestream 39 in our space shooter DevVenture. So by the end of our last live stream, I was trying to create that pattern, all right, of strategic, so strategic and then tactical and then operational layers. And each layer should communicate with the adjacent layers, right? So the middle layer, the tactical layer, communicates both up and down, whereas the strategic layer only communicates down, and the operational layer only communicates up. And they communicate via briefs and reports. So the strategic layer will provide a brief to the tactical layer. The tactical layer will provide a brief to the operational layer. And then the operational layer provides a report to the tactical layer, which then provides a report to the strategic layer. So it's like a yo-yo, so like you send the yo-yo down and then the yo-yo comes back up. That kind of setup. Or if you want to take a programming metaphor, it's like recursion. You go down towards the base case and then you cycle all the way back up again. So let's go back into project management and task assignment and see where we were at the end of the live stream. So remember I was answering the questions. So I said I would finish that and go through it with you at the start of this live stream. So let's do that as promised. Excuse me. So let's answer your questions. So just to remember, the questions were as follows. Question 1, demo feature prioritization. Which features do you consider essential for a demo that will impress funders? So for example, do you consider a polished combat system demo worthy, or multiple ship roles? Or do you consider simple AI behaviors, visual UI polish? And then are there any nice to have demo features that could be deferred if we have time or resources? Or rather, that could be deferred if time or resources are tight. So if we are limited on time or resources, what are the things that we could drop that aren't completely fundamental to the demo? So question 2, the demo timeline or deadlines. Do you have any target date or time frame for demo completion? If not, that's okay. We can estimate based on effort. Are there any external events you are aiming for? For example, funding windows, publisher meetings, or something similar. And question 3, progress detailing. For the current in-progress items, signals or behavior management, should more detail be tracked? For example, do you want to specify sub-steps or requirements to call them done? And then question 4, the roadmap/milestone validation. Is the milestone structure clear and reflecting your demo goals? Should anything be merged or split or renamed? Would you like the milestone deliverables to include a playable scene, design documentation, a pitch deck, or a video showcase? After you answer these, I will then update and refine each milestone based on your required demo features or goals. I'll add any timing dependencies if you provided them. I will split or merge milestones and clarify sub-steps if needed. And I will create the refined demo-focused milestone roadmap for easy tracking. You can reply to each of the 4 questions above or just provide whatever info you feel is needed for me to continue milestone refinement. All right, so that was the response. And I was busy answering that when we ran out of time last time. So let's go through my answers and see how Perplexity dealt with them. Okay, so let's answer your questions. So answer to question 1, the combat should be decent. I messed up there and didn't add in the B. But yeah, the combat should be decent, i.e. not necessarily polished, but at least engaging. The AI behaviors should create an immersive experience, even if there is only a subset of the full library. And the UI or visuals should be, in quotes, polished. But this is the last step. And then the answer to question 2, I haven't thought of a demo deadline yet. I've been focused on getting the groundwork done for prototyping and testing. Perhaps June 2026 is more realistic than saying something grandiose like by the end of the year. As for external events, I'm not aware of any, therefore I don't have any in mind. And then question 3, yes, having more detailed tasks would be helpful. We start with a book and we break it down. So chapter to section to subsection to heading to paragraph to sentence to word to character, right? So if you think about it, you don't write a book in chapters. You write a book in characters, right? When you're typing out a book in your favorite text editor or whatever, you don't write a full chapter in a single button press. You type it out one character at a time, all right? But you don't think of a book, a story. If you're writing a story, you don't think of a book in terms of characters. You think of it in terms of chapters or in terms of a plot, right? So you will have a sequence of events that should happen on a high level, right? So you know, for example, the story should include these characters, and the story will follow these sequence of events, and it will culminate with this particular ending. All right, and then you zoom in on each of those sections in your plot, right? So chapters, and then in each chapter you break it down into sections, and each section you break into subsections. And then each subsection will have several headings. Now, this isn't necessarily true for a storybook, like a narrative fiction book. But if you think of a non-fiction document, like a thesis or a dissertation or a textbook, then this is most definitely true, right? Then you've got things like headings in a subsection. Maybe a subsection has a few headings. And then in each of those headings, you've got paragraphs, right? A paragraph is a collection of sentences. And then each sentence is a collection of words, and each word is a collection of characters, right? Including spaces and tabs and new lines and punctuation marks. All of these things are characters, right? So when you're creating the story, you work in terms of characters. But when you think of the story, you think of it in this chain, going down towards the characters and then back up sometimes towards the chapters. And you're like, okay, well, I've written quite a lot of characters now. Do I have a word? Do I have a sentence? Do I have a paragraph? Have I made a heading complete? Have I finished enough headings to complete the subsection? Did I finish enough subsections to complete the section? And the same thing for sections. Did I complete the chapter? And did I finish all the chapters? Is the book done? Right? So it's that same system. And I wanted to use this analogy or metaphor, if you would like to call it that, with Perplexity to help it to understand that this is the way I think. I think top down, right? So I think in big picture terms and work down towards the details. I don't like to work in terms of just the details from the start, because as soon as you start at the detail level, it's so easy to get lost. That's why they say you get lost in the details. And so you need to have that high level view. You need to have a map of what's going on, right? What do I need to do? And then how can I do it? So I just wanted to make that clear to you that this is the way I work. You might not agree with it, but this is the way I work, okay? And so this is the sequence that I gave it. This metaphor is an exaggeration, but I think you get my point. Right? So yes, it is an exaggeration. Not all books contain all these steps, and most certainly not all tasks will have these many levels of breaking it down, right? But the sequence is illustrative of what I want Perplexity to know, is that this is my line of thinking. I want to go top down, right? And so not all of these breakdown steps will happen in this thread. Some of the more tactical or logistical breakdown steps will happen in other threads. The roadmap is clear, and oh, this is now question 4, my mistake. I should have mentioned that. So moving on to question 4 now. The roadmap is clear and structured well so far, yes. If it makes sense for a milestone to have a deliverable, then add it. But don't add a deliverable just for the sake of it. Thank you for, and now this is obviously Perplexity's response, right? So let's just do that. Okay. Thank you for the clear, thoughtful answers. Here's how this will shape the refined, demo-oriented milestone roadmap, with your priorities and breakdown philosophy in mind. So the refined milestones for demo development. Excuse me. So let's continue. Milestone 1, the core system foundations. The goal is a solid, testable groundwork for demo prototyping. The deliverables is a playable scene with functional movement and core systems. The breakdown, you should have a layered AI control system, strategic, tactical, and operational, as we've done already, and are continually building on. And then you should have 6 degrees of freedom physics-based movement. You should have a health system that takes damage and provides feedback to the player. There needs to be a pattern and behavior management through signals, which is more detail tracked. I'm not sure what it means by more detail tracked, to be honest. And then there should be a status, right? So these things are either in progress. Oh, sorry, no, this is the status of the milestone itself, right? So the status of the milestone is that it is in progress. Signals and behavior management detailed next. Okay, and then milestone 2. Engaging combat prototype. We want to have, so that's the goal, right? We want to have an engaging, working combat loop to demonstrate the fun factor. The deliverable needs to be a scene with working combat, observable enemy and player combat behaviors. So this was deceiving. I thought there was going to be more. I should have just said and. So there should be a working scene with combat and an observable enemy/player combat behavior dynamic. Then the breakdown. We need to implement the core combat mechanics like shooting, hit or damage, and effects. There needs to be we need to integrate combat into the movement/AI foundation and ensure that the AI can enter or exit combat modes. There needs to be basic feedback like sounds, hit sparks, health reduction, and then optionally there needs to be a placeholder weapon variety or enemy types if quick wins. And then milestone 3. Immersive AI experience. The goal is that the AI creates belief in a living world, even if the features are limited. The deliverables, there needs to be a demo scene with at least 2 AI roles interacting. For example, the miner and the pirate, or the miner and the defender if you're playing as the pirate. Or the defender and the pirate if you're playing as the miner, right? Either way, whichever role you choose, there will always be 2 different AI types working dynamically with each other. And so the breakdown, we need to have a behavior library. We need to implement at least 2 behaviors like seek and evade. There needs to be pattern chaining. There needs to be a pattern chaining demo, right? So one enemy should switch between roles or behaviors. So first seek, then mine, then evade. Because evade is just to move away from that target, right? So you could either think of it as first seek one object, then mine that object, and then seek another object. Or you could have seek the object, mine the object, and then evade that object until you find something else to seek. Because maybe you haven't found anything yet. And you don't want to stay where you are. You want to keep moving. And so you start evading, right? Other kinds of chains. Do a prospector's ping to discover which of the asteroids in the scene are the highest probable candidates for mining, right? And then seek the highest probable candidate. Once you reach it, start mining. Once you've reached full capacity, return to the capital ship to deposit your cargo and go off again on the same loop. And so you have this like loop, if this was the mining vessel I'm talking about now. Okay, so that's the pattern chaining. Although it shouldn't be pattern chaining, it should be behavior chaining within a pattern. I suppose depending on the layer, it makes sense, right? So the strategic layer should be pattern chaining. So first call this pattern, then call that pattern. And then the NPC behavior manager needs to do operational chaining, right? Behavior chaining. So first do this behavior, then this behavior, then this behavior within a pattern. And then an operational layer needs to do operation chaining, right? So rotate and then move, and then rotate and then move, or whatever the operation might be. So if it's mining, cause the barrel to spin and start causing damage to the asteroid and start extracting resources and all the steps involved. All right. Show the role-based differentiation in the demo, and optional, add a third distinct behavior if time allows. And then milestone 4, player agency and swapping. The goal is to demo players' experience. It lets the players of the demo experience both the player pilot and the AI roles. The deliverables is to switch seamlessly between player and AI control. That I don't think I want to do this. I need to correct this part. This is not allowable. What I actually should have Perplexity deal with instead is at certain points, I would rather have the player change game modes so that the whole thing shifts. The winning and losing conditions are shifted. The patterns and all of the things are shifted, right? Because if you're playing in a game mode, you can set up a scene in a specific way. And when you set up the scene, you have different parameters in the scene's initialization. And that will govern the strategic layer in which patterns it calls and all of those kind of things. So yes, in general, you should be able to just take the player and move it into another vessel and it should still function, right? But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I don't think it makes sense for my vision of the game to have this particular feature. So I'm going to correct Perplexity right away before I forget. In milestone 4, you mentioned allowing the player to change from the player vessel to an AI vessel in the same scene and game mode. This is not something I want in my game. I would rather have different game modes with different rule sets that allow the player to experience the perspectives of all 3 ship types. By doing it this way, we can put variables / parameters in the scene initialization that will encourage the strategic layer of the NPC governing scripts to call the correct patterns to give the player a meaningful experience. For example, if the player chooses mining mode, actually let's make this title case, then there should be horror dynamics where the player feels vulnerable and uncertain of the enemy's whereabouts. But in the defender mode, the player will not feel this way because the defender vessel is more agile and the enemy ships are the enemy ship locations are known to the player via the I'll just say LiDAR minimap, for example. This is better than simply plopping the player into an AI vessel in a specific player mode where the rules and controls are general enough to allow it, but boring enough to cause disinterest. Okay, we'll deal with this after the milestones. So we finished with milestone 4, right? So we just ignoring this because we have to correct it. But anyway, the NPC and player controller switch for at least one ship, ensure smooth handoff with no bugs or confusion, and we have a UI prompt or feedback for the switch. My apologies, I smacked the microphone there. Milestone 5. Visual and UI polish. So the goal for the visual and UI polish is to have a demo scene. Oh, sorry. The goal is to have first impressions that look professional for a demo presentation. And the deliverable is a demo scene with UI, feedback, and appealing visuals. The breakdown is that we have a core HUD, a heads-up display, that has health and ammo and targeting and all the essential parts, right? And then we need to have effects for combat and movement and damage. So when you shoot a projectile, is there sound? Are there effects from the ship, that demonstrate it's firing the projectile? Like if there's an actual weapon battle, does it, blast and recoil and have some kind of like shock absorption in the battle, that it like goes doof, like this, and then you see the projectile flying, and while it's flying, does it leave a trail of like sparks or something, like a glow, like an after trail or something, right? And when it hits something, does it explode and cause like a particle effect or like a gas cloud? Because if it's a plasma, it should cause like a mini nebula. Let me just show you what I mean. So it should have this kind of after effect, because when a star explodes, you are left with a nebula like this. Not always. Sometimes the nebula is what causes stars to be born, but in a lot of cases, when a star is when a big massive star dies in a supernova, it leaves behind a white dwarf, commonly in the center of the nebula, and then all of the gas particles and the various elements that star contained, they are pushed out in radially, in a spherical radial pattern, and then based on density, right? Because not all the atoms and elements have the same mass, and so that the same impulse or force at the initial explosion of the supernova will accelerate all the various elements at different speeds. And so this is why you see it's not a perfect sphere, right? This is why some of the particles are lagging behind while the others are like on the outer edge. So you'll notice that when you look at the colors of the nebula, a lot of nebulae have this like a red ring around the outer edge. And that's because the emission spectrum of hydrogen is red. The wavelength is red. It's a reddish color. And the white dwarf in the middle is still glowing a white light. So it's giving the white light to the hydrogen, which is then absorbing all the white light and emitting the red light. And so this is how astronomers can kind of tell the various elements, right? So you'll see in the middle here, there's like bluish green colors, and that's usually like nitrogen or oxygen, or like copper also has a bluish color in the emission spectrum, I think. But yeah, so like this is the famous Eye Nebula, for example. Here you can see there's a lot of hydrogen going around, and in the middle you'll see very close to the white dwarf in the middle there, all of this like green matter, and obviously that's a different element, right? So they weigh different amounts, and so F delta T is M delta V, right? The conservation of momentum, and the impulse, which is F delta T, force times the amount of time the force is applied. In the supernova case, it's very short, right? And M delta V is mass times the change in velocity. And so obviously, if you have a larger mass with the same impulse, the change in velocity will be smaller. Okay, a direct correlation. So I hope that makes sense to you. And the whole point of explaining that was that because a plasma bolt is just a cylinder of highly energized matter, so an ionized gas, it's not really a gas. Plasma is a different phase of matter completely to gas. But think of it as like a ball of star, because that's basically the sun and all the other stars are basically plasma balls, like huge balls of plasma that have these like highly ionized particles flying around and smacking into each other and exploding to protect the star from collapsing in on its own weight, right? And if you shoot a ball of plasma at something and you're talking about this in space, it shouldn't just be like a splash and then it's done. If it was on Earth, that would be different, right? It would like hit something and then almost goes like a splash, and then the plasma would like dissipate into the atmosphere or fall onto the ground because of gravity. But in space, it's different because there isn't a singular point towards which everything falls. Like on Earth, everything falls towards the singular point in the center of mass of the Earth, right? So by the center of the Earth, everything is pulled towards the center of the Earth. That's the main force of gravity on Earth. There are other forces of gravity like the moon, which causes tides and so on, right? But compared to Earth's gravity, we basically don't even notice it that much. So in space, you've got many points of gravity all around you, and they're all like background forces and stuff, unless you're like close to a star. But my point is, if the plasma bolt hits a target like a wall and it goes boom, right? It should cause almost like a nebula because it's expanding outwards, and maybe the impact caused some microfusion. We don't know. And some of the particles fuse together and cause heavier materials, which then stay behind or move a little bit slower. And some of the particles don't fuse and they fly off faster, right? So it's like boom, and then it causes a like nebula pattern. And you could use different nebula patterns and just like randomize it when it hits. So, you know, we could play with that. It could be really interesting. And appealing visuals. Effects for combat, movement, and damage. So that's what triggered this whole thing, this whole long discussion that I went on about like nebulae and space and fusion and plasma, was all just because of effects for combat, for combat, movement, and damage. And then we need to have placeholders for basic art. So a basic art pass. And then we should do this for the ships, the enemies, and the environments. So I think you kind of saw that I have done a basic art pass, right? For the ships, the enemies, and the environments. So all of the ships have a placeholder, which you've seen. The environments themselves have placeholder backgrounds and stars and all of that. So that's not a problem. And then audio and particle polish, like I mentioned, you should have sound effects and animations. And when a plasma bolt hits something, it should cause like a micro nebula. And the title, the menu, and a splash screen, if time allows. And then that's the end of milestone 5. So we move on to milestone 6 now, right? So demo, packaging, and pitch materials. So the goal here is to have a ready-to-share demo build and core pitch assets. So things like the exported demo, the actual build of the demo, plus a pitch document or a video, like a trailer, and maybe a YouTube video that I publish on my channel, and so on, right? And then the breakdown, we need to have a stable, distributable Godot demo build, exported and tested, a short demo walkthrough or feature list for the funding, for funding emails and social pages and so on. And then a quick start contributor document, which has minimal documentation, which is literally just to support the demo. So what are the controls of all the features that exist in the demo? And if you run into a particular bug, how do you report it, or whatever, right? So what are the limitations? What are the features to expect in the demo? What do you not expect in the demo? You know, managing expectations and all that. So that's milestone 6. And then the timeline or tracking adjustments. The target demo date is June 2026, and we can adjust it as we progress, determining by how, depending on how fast we are actually moving. And then we can review each milestone's breakdown here at the strategic level, and then the tactical or logistical breakdowns will move to the appropriate threads as you prefer. Each milestone includes a real demo-facing deliverable only when it adds clear value. And at the end now it says ready for you to review, suggest edits, or approve, so we can proceed to status tracking and milestone management. So then I made this whole thing about milestone 4 not being correct. I think you remember that. And so this is the response. I said we would get to it. The adjustment is both strategically smart and essential for a compelling demo and final game. Here's how I'll revise milestone 4, the roadmap, and upcoming management. So a revised milestone 4, game modes, and player perspectives. The goal here is to deliver distinctly immersive experiences tailored to each ship via custom game modes and rule sets. The deliverables, multiple game modes, like mining, defender, pirate, each with unique rules or objectives or dynamics. And then we have scene initialization configures environment, AI parameters, and player constraints to match the mode. The strategic layer scripts react dynamically. So for example, a horror atmosphere in the mining mode, tactical advantage in defender mode, or a cunning stealth pirate mode, you know, like roguish elements, so ambush tactics and all of those kind of things, right? So it's like, if you're playing as a mining vessel, you should feel like prey. And if you're playing as a pirate vessel, you should feel like a predator. And if you're playing as a defender vessel, you should have this like balance in the middle, right? So you're kind of like in between predator and prey. And your job is obviously to protect the prey from the predator. So you've got that. And then in terms of the breakdown, we need to design and implement scene level loading logic for mode selection. And for each mode, we need to specify and configure the player ship, the core gameplay dynamics, like enemy visibility, the tension level, resource location mechanics, the NPC strategic layer variable triggers, like pattern selection based on game mode. And then we need to have feedback and UI elements that are unique per mode. So for example, the defender should have a LiDAR minimap, and there should be suspense effects cues in the mining mode, like the game should feel darker somehow. I don't know how, but somehow, right? So there shouldn't be as many like super bright nebulae in the background. And remember I added those 2 spotlights on the mining vessel? I don't know if we have time for me to show that, but like I added those 2 spotlights to shine on the barrel of the battle arm of the mining vessel, right? And so it kind of feels darker, and you've got this like torch, and you're going towards the asteroid, and you're shining your spotlights on this asteroid, and it's like basically the only thing you see, and you've got this like vignette of darkness around it, you know? And so your visibility is almost like tunnel vision on this asteroid, and you're not as agile as the other ships, and you're not as fast as the other ships, and you don't have your own weapons for defense, and so you feel like vulnerable, and you don't know where the enemy is, and you're too scared to use your prospector's ping because maybe you give your position away and the pirate comes and attacks you, and all of these kind of things, right? And so it feels like a horror game. And in terms of the So that's the suspense effects queues, right? And then when the pirates actually start attacking the mining vessel, you could have other cues like an alarm system in the cockpit that starts to like flash red to say you are currently under attack or something, right? And that causes almost like a little bit of a panic, or to make the player feel a bit flustered, like, I can't really evade this guy, and I need to get back to the base to put my resources down in the the offloading bay or whatever it's called, at dispatch, and I'm too far away. How am I going to get there? I don't know where the defender ship is, or if he's still around. Has he been defeated? I don't know what's going on. And you start to like have this suspense and this like, all of that kind of stuff. And maybe we should add a notification when the player chooses the mining vessel that this mode is intentionally designed to feel like a horror game, just to warn players, so the people who aren't fond of horror games can avoid playing that style. Like they stay away from it because they're not fans of the horror genre. And then we have playtests or demos. So you playtest and demo each mode for distinctiveness and engagement. So the idea for the mining, the mining mode being a horror game, it's not meant to be like a true horror game, like a real horror game, like super terrifying and all of that stuff. But the way the mining vessel operates and the way that the game dynamics work lends itself towards horror, right? So it could be a light horror. It doesn't have to be a deep, heavy horror, but it is still a horror game. So we kind of do have to manage expectations. Like, this is a soft-core horror game mode, and so you should expect horror elements to exist in this game mode. So if you're not a fan of horror genres, then kind of change your mind now. Are you sure you want to play this game? It's a horror trope, or it's like a horror mode, and then the player can say, yes, I'm sure, or no, actually, I'm not sure. I want to choose a different game mode. The benefits: enhanced replay value and demo showcasing power. So it shows your AI and your game architecture flexibility. There's greater player interest and immersion with the various offerings through the game modes, right? So different players can get different things. So some players want to feel like some kind of savior, like, I'm going to go and protect that mining vessel from the enemy. And some people like to feel like a powerful predator, well, not predator, but like a powerful, almost like Viking, or like a pirate. It is a pirate after all, right? A pirate vessel. So they want to feel like this like powerful warrior type, maybe not warrior type, but like a rogue player. And so they take on the pirate mode. Or some people like horror games, and so they take on the miner mode because, they like horror games. And then this allows that. It gives that offering, but it gives a specialized offering. You see what I mean? So it's not like you take the same level with the same elements, and the asteroids are all in the same place, or maybe they are shuffled randomly, I don't know. But like, it has the same rule set, and then it just allows the player to shift between particular vessels, and the same game carries on, and you can just switch between the three modes. I mean, that's an interesting idea. It is an interesting idea. And maybe we can add that in later, but for now, I think it's not only easier to do separate scenes with separate rules and separate settings and separate everything, right, for the different game modes. Not only is it easier, but it gives its own power and its own offering. Like we've found out, right, that there's more showcase power and there's more value in having those three separate modes with different game rules and all that. So then there's greater player interest and immersion, and it aligns technical and model level architecture with strategic decision, ensuring a meaningful demo and future scalability. So then an update to the roadmap All references to the player NPC vessel switching will be replaced by game mode selection with variable player perspectives and rule sets. Milestone 4 now reads distinct game modes for each ship type, and the upcoming progress tracking in this thread will ensure each mode's tech, atmosphere, and strategic AI response deliver the intended experience. So the next steps, I'll update the milestone breakdown and tracking template with your preferred mode-centric strategy. When ready, we can detail the requirements and the progress for mining mode, defender mode, pirate mode, etc. following your design vision. Let me know if there's a particular game mode or experience you want to prioritize for the demo, and I'll ensure the roadmap and management reflect that. Okay, so before we continue with all of this, I see that we have about 15 minutes left. I want to explain to this thread that the other threads are the different layers, right? So I need to establish in this thread that this is the strategic layer and that there are 2 other layers and they will be separate threads, and we communicate between threads with briefs and reports and all that. So let's do this while we still have some time. Okay. I want to make sure you understand that there are different layers governed by different threads. This thread, the task project management and task assignment thread is the strategic layer. Strategics layer. The strategic layer. I will soon create another thread called task management and operational delegation that will manage the tactics or that will comprise, or rather that will constitute, maybe not constitute, and that will be, let's just say that, and that will be the tactical layer. Finally, the operational layer comprises multiple threads, each with its own specialization and purpose. The threads, the layers, my mistake. The layers only communicate with adjacent layers. With vertically, actually no, I'm not going to use the word vertically here because it can be adjacent in the other sense. So if you think of it, right, so this could be the 3 layers, right? So that's layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, but you could have a layer that goes all the way through, a columnar layer that goes right through the whole project. And each of the layers can communicate to this column layer because it's adjacent to them, right? So it's like I can send a report to this column layer from the tactical layer or from the strategic layer or from any of the operational threads in the operational layer. It doesn't matter. I can still send it to this one, right? Something that is adjacent to all three. So it doesn't have to be vertically adjacent. It can be horizontally adjacent. And in the same sense, an operational layer, right? So one operational thread can communicate with another operational thread in the same layer because they are horizontally adjacent as well. You see? So yeah, with adjacent threads. With adjacent threads. What I mean by this is that adjacent layers or threads. This facilitates a so-called chain of command and report that manages the project in an organized and logical structure. This means the strategic layer communicates only with the tactical layer and can't reach the operational layer directly, and vice versa for the operational layer. Threads in the same layer or horizontally adjacent layers more on that below. Threads in the same layer or horizontally adjacent layers can also communicate directly. A horizontally adjacent layer could be something like a columnar layer. Where all horizontal layers are adjacent to it and can communicate with it directly. I hope you understood this point. Let me know if you need me to clarify any of this further, to clarify. Your explanation is clear and well structured. I understand and will adhere to this layered organizational model for project communication and management. The strategic layer, which is this thread, manages the high-level planning, the vision, the milestone definition, communicates only with a tactical layered thread, not directly with operational threads. It manages the roadmap, progress tracking, and milestone validation. The tactical layer, the task management and operational delegation thread, receives strategy milestone objectives from the strategic layer, breaks down goals into actionable tasks and delegates them, reports progress and blockers to the strategic layer, assigns tasks to the operational threads. And the operational layer has multiple specialized threads, executes specific detailed tasks assigned by the tactical layer, reports only to the tactical layer and not the strategic layer directly, and each thread focuses on its specialization. Example, AI coding, UI, combat systems, etc. And then there are horizontal or columnar layers, which serve as integration or support layers that communicate with all horizontal layers as needed. It made a mistake there. It's supposed to be horizontal. The columnar layer is a vertical layer, so I need to correct that. And then it needs to facilitate coordination across threads, threads or layers without violating the core chain of command. I will maintain communication boundaries rigidly, route reports, requirements, and updates according to this model, and uphold the chain of command and indirect reporting for optimal project organization. No further clarification needed. I am fully aligned with your structured approach, ready to continue managing the project strategically and milestone tracking per your system. If you define a horizontal layer or make changes, just advise me here and I'll adapt accordingly. It seems we have our understandings inverted. For me, the strategic, tactical, and horizontal and operational layers are horizontal, while the columnar layers are vertical. Also, remember that it is possible for operational threads to communicate directly with one another if required, since they are adjacent within the same layer. They are horizontally adjacent. This should be also one more thing. The tactical thread should include the following responsibility. Manage an inventory of all operational threads in the operational layer, so delegation is informed and efficient. You may rephrase this responsibility in whatever way works better to you, as long as the message is conveyed correctly. This should be the last time I clarify the setup to you. Okay, so we've basically hit the hour now. We have like 50 seconds left, so I'll just go through this response very quickly and then we'll call it after that. Okay, so thank you for clarifying your architecture. Here's the revised understanding and the responsibilities per your structure. Strategic, tactical, and operational layers are horizontal. Each layer consists of multiple threads grouped at the same horizontal level. Direct communication is permitted between threads within the same layer. For example, operational threads can coordinate among themselves. And then the vertical or columnar layers serve as connectors or integration points and interact with all horizontal layers. Then you've got responsibilities like the tactical layer. The tactical thread acts as the central coordinator for translating strategic objectives into operational tasks. It manages and maintains an inventory of all threads within the operational layer, ensuring that task delegation is targeted, efficient, and responsive to current capabilities and specializations. Rephrased, the tactical thread keeps an up-to-date registry of all active operational threads, providing visibility and facilitating optimal assignment of tasks based on each thread's status and specialization. Then there's a summary of the communication model. The horizontal layer communication. Threads within the same strategic, tactical, or operational layer can communicate directly. Vertical columnar layer communication. Vertical layers interface with all horizontal layers and threads for integration and support. Your architecture is now fully understood and internalized. I'll adhere strictly to these rules and responsibilities as we move forward. No further clarifications required. Excellent. So at this point, I want to thank our junior DevVenturer, Cubes. Thank you so much for your continued support. And to everybody else, thank you so much for your time and your attention. Thank you for joining me on this live stream.